All right. Well, a good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here it is, Friday night, PJNET, a night we always look forward to because every Friday night we will be having one of the most ingenious and observant and cogent analytical and political minds known on this planet or unknown on this planet at the moment. But that is changing, and let's waste no time and let's bring all the way from Louisiana, the great state, Roger, who has been busy all week studying a topic we're going to talk about in just a moment. But before we go to the Twitter terms of service and the Twitter rules, as we talked about last night, there's a lot going on. A group of people have mustered up, and they want to stop FEPA. And the only way to FEPA, by the way, stands for Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. Now, what could be wrong with that, Roger?
Evidence-based policymaking.
Sure. I mean, no, who could not want to do that?
How are they going to get their evidence?
The devil is not in the details in this, although there are. Hang on. I'm seeing, I see the stream on the chat room, so it must be working. I'm getting some messages in the chat saying, where's the stream? So we are. Here we have, Roger, a bill that was proposed by Paul Ryan over a year ago. Now, you and I have been involved in advocacy of certain bills that favor, that we agree with politically. And one of the things we want to do is get a bunch of co-sponsors, the idea being to get what is called the majority of the majority. If the majority, if the Republicans are in the majority with 300 Republicans in the House, well, what you want is 150 co-sponsors, right? I mean, the majority of the majority.
Right.
And at that point, you can say the bill has some momentum, it has some people behind it. Maybe it's worth bringing this thing to the floor for a debate and a vote. But here we have a bill with 3 co-sponsors 1 year later. Paul Ryan on his way out, cleaning out his office. So he decides to bring this bill to the floor, and I guess the Republicans figured, well, our leader Paul Ryan bringing it to the floor, I guess we're supposed to vote for it. I guess that's how it happened.
Mark, I want to stop you right there just for a minute. Before we even go on any further about what this bill will actually do, that is one of the reasons. That's an example of promises not kept, and it's one of the reasons why Republicans didn't keep the House. One of the promises they made, actually, in taking the majority, and when Ryan went in even, is this idea that everybody was going to read the bill before they voted on it. And that did not happen in this case.
Yeah, this particular bill was 236 pages. And, that's almost a dead giveaway that if you've got to cloud it in that many pages, this is huge, and deserves more time to be gone through and thought over. And
they didn't fight for co-sponsors. The fact that it only had 3 co-sponsors tells you he wasn't even encouraging people to read it or know anything about it. He was just letting it kind of hang out there in the ether.
Not just letting it hang out there. You said something that kind of triggered me. He didn't want anybody to know about it.
No.
Sounds like to me that he wanted to keep this a secret and then use his political posture as speaker to introduce it so everybody would be dumb. And not know and say, well, good enough for our leader, good enough for me, and everybody mustered up. Now, 17 people actually voted no. That's a good list. I don't have it handy, but Louis Gohmert, I promise you, is among them. So I think you stumbled on something there that Paul Ryan wasn't seeking co-sponsors, because to co-sponsor it, you got to kind of become familiar with it. So the chicanery alone is reason enough to know that this is probably a bad bill. Remember when we were at PJNET, when Boehner just out of nowhere said he woke up one morning and God told him to quit? We wanted a guy from Orlando, Webster.
Not the most conservative guy, by the way.
No, not by any means. A moderate. He's from Orlando, which is kind of a purple district. I mean,
We even got some pushback.
Oh,
Some people
heck
like,
yeah.
his Liberty score's only a 74.
Right, yeah.
We want somebody who's a 90 or a 95.
Yeah, and but his main tenet, the reason that we selected him was, one, as a compromise candidate. We knew we weren't going to, we were fighting the rhinos, so we wanted to go in with a more moderate position. But the two tenets were, one, this is a compromise candidate. Number two, his main thrust was, we're going to have regular order. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And that's all if we could just have regular order. This is the very reason we want regular order. The bill needs to be read. It needs to be understood. It needs to be debated publicly. Too much. I was having a conversation with someone earlier this week, and they were, I was trying to describe, what is PJNet? Well, let's think about why is PJNet, and there are others. But the reason why is we feel like we have no voice. Not that we know we're not going to get our way, but really, 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 what good would it do to call your United States representative in the House? Really? Would it? Now we should do these things, don't get me wrong. But really, they are inundated with calls. How on earth do you think you're going to get heard? Now, it's even worse when you call the United States Senate, because there's only 2 senators in each state.
Right.
How do you get heard? And then these committees, they meet in behind closed doors, and then it comes out of the committee, and the show on the floor is just to rubber stamp it. Where is the government open, where people have input? It's almost like you have to go to a town hall meeting to find it, what we studied in civics in the 9th grade.
Right.
That government does not
Absolutely.
exist in the United States government, as a practical matter. So anyway, that's...
No, and we always did on PJNet do a good job of getting the attention of Congress. Getting the attention of individual congressmen, getting people together in large numbers and discussing and tweeting about topics and everything like that. And that's really the best part of PJNet.
Well, the reason we were able to do that is we had substantial leverage with a group and a team that was very vocal in a measurable way on Twitter. But apparently, and I kept hinting, let's stay under the radar as long as we can, because I was afraid the other side would figure out what we're doing technically, and they could, of course, do the same thing if they had someone with the technical prowess to write the code. But that didn't happen, but instead it actually became effective, and the mass media began pouncing on it. The Russian bot narrative started, but most importantly, Twitter changed the rules.
They did. And just before we segue into that, just to finish up on FIPA a little bit, because you hit on something that Trump has not signed this bill, but he's not vetoed the bill, and he's got like 24 hours left to veto the bill, right?
That was, yeah, if the 12th is actually the 10th day, being a Saturday, but that would be 10 days, yeah.
All right. So we need Trump to veto the bill, and we hope that he will. And and one of my basic problems with it is it creates new bureaucracies, and then it has these bureaucracies collect your data from all other government agencies and put it all into one nice, neat little place where the government will know everything that there is to know about you.
And only the government. It'll be secure, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, it'll be secure. I can tell you they are encouraging medical doctors to ask people whether or not they go to church. They're encouraging medical doctors to ask people whether or not they're gun owners. All kinds of non-medical questions are coming up now if you'll go to see a doctor for the first time. And I generally don't answer any of those questions.
Right. I have in a doctor's office, they want your insurance information and all that. But yeah, I've been asked, are there, literally on a questionnaire in a doctor's office, are there guns? Do you have guns in your home?
Mm-hmm.
And of course they would say that
I leave it blank.
I didn't answer.
Mm-hmm.
No. I assumed the defense would be, well, if you've got suicidal thoughts or tendencies, that might be medically relevant at that point. Well, let's decide that later. But let's not open up with how many guns do you have in your office or in your home, or do you have any? So,
Right.
yeah.
But yeah, Mark. Moving on to the Twitter rules and how PJNet functioned. And really, I was a part of PJNet, but I also had, of course, my own Twitter account. And I, at one time, was kind of a major influencer on Twitter. Okay. I had a lot of followers. I would get a lot of retweets. The message would get out there. And I kind of got away from Twitter for a while. And one of the things that I discovered just in going back and looking at the account, which still has a lot of followers, is some things have happened with that account. That account's not seen by the number of people that it used to be seen by. Mm-hmm. And I can tell, and the lists weren't working as well. All kinds of things that just weren't looking as well. And then I started learning about shadow banning, and then I started reading about some of the things that happened with PJNet. Now, they actually basically disallowed the PJNet app. Am I correct?
Right. They suspended the app itself. Now, by the way, that was concurrent with a suspension and crackdown of numerous. It was concurrent. I don't think that we were singled out, because this was at the time, when the Russian manipulative bots were influencing and defiling our election process by, well, tweeting.
Okay. Did they tell you what rules you broke?
No, that's standard practice.
What?
No, that's the way it is. Whether you as an individual gets suspended, they will simply give you a link to the Twitter rules and say you have broken one of the rules. Now, imagine for a moment being apprehended by the police and arrested and thrown in jail. And they would say, you have violated one of the statutes of this state. Mm-hmm. Here's the law library. Go and take a look.
Like, which statute? Yeah. And of course, I had experience of being suspended on Twitter before and being very confused by it. Going in, looking at the rules and trying to figure out what exact rule is it that they say that I've broken. One of the things that's difficult if you sit down and you read the Twitter rules, Mark, is how subjectively they're written.
Well, but even before that, they're very voluminous. And
yes.
And the thing is that there's one of the things that makes it hard. By the way, I have read the Twitter rules to the extent that it's humanly possible. I've spent hours and hours. But one of the things, before even we get into the nature and general, the vagueness of it, you're reading down the rules and it'll say, not only these rules, the other rules, click here. Well, now you got to go over there and read something else. And of course, over there, there'll be a link to go over there. And
it's never ending.
Why can't we just start at the top and go to the bottom? Okay. Mm-hmm. It is extremely hard just if you set out earnestly saying, I am going to study and become expert on the Twitter rules. I couldn't imagine a more difficult task.
I was specifically reading some of the rules on trending topics.
Okay.
And they were so vague that it seemed to me that, because everybody wants to try to make a topic trend, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. You want to encourage a whole bunch of people to tweet about the pro-life march. When the pro-life march happens, you want to start up a conversation. You want to get a hashtag to trend. And certainly I can understand that they wouldn't want you just created a bot with no human input that was just tweeting the hashtag over and over again. I get that. But they use words like, manipulating topics and so on and so forth. And it's so vague that they can really shut you down for anything they decide they want to shut you down for.
All right. Well, there's two. Let's talk about trending. There's two basic types of offenses. One is trying to stuff the ballot box, trying to make something trend artificially, okay, by the use of automation, bots, or whatever. The other is to catch a ride on a trending topic. Let's say the trending topic right now is, lunar eclipse. So you
Right.
begin using the hashtag lunar eclipse in tweets that have nothing to do with the lunar eclipse. You simply know that
So
it's
that you can also
trending,
put in your hashtag.
but you want your message to be injected into that conversation that you know a lot of people are reading and talking about, and you just so it's off topic. And I think that's
For example, if I was to say, hashtag lunar eclipse, Donald Trump is nuts for wanting to build a wall. That would
exactly
be something
right.
completely off topic.
Off topic.
Right.
Okay. But you're using the hashtag to elevate the visibility of the tweet, and that is certainly in bad taste. I mean, it's no different than we have here in our chat room or any others. Off-topic chat is unwelcome in any chat room.
Right.
Okay.
In any chat room. And that's why in its pure form, I don't have a problem with it. But the way the rule is written, Mark, there are people that if we were discussing violence in America, and let's say the hashtag was stop violence in America, okay, and that was the topic. Well, I happen to believe that the number one form of violence in America and the number one cause of other types of violence in America is abortion.
Yeah, that's a violent act.
It's a violent act. Twitter may well decide, oh no, this abortion doesn't have anything to do with violence in America.
Okay.
So
and here you actually said a lot there. Twitter decides. Okay, these rules are written, as you said, so vaguely that the interpretation and the application of the rules are in the sole discretion of an anonymous, unknown entity called Twitter. Let me tell you one other example about trending, okay? Twitter states in their rules specifically that even though a hashtag may qualify as trending based on the numeric algorithm, they may prevent it from trending because they just don't consider it newsworthy. Do you know? Exactly. Did you catch that when you read it? It's in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's in there.
And this,
and I can remember some times we didn't trend on some topics in some PJNET rallies where I think that was the only reason we didn't trend. They didn't consider our topic to be newsworthy.
Well, this is what chaps my ass, okay? Because here's the deal. Mm-hmm. It's not considered newsworthy. So, in other words, Twitter, look at this in a broader scope. In other words, Twitter, you have this mathematical algorithm that you develop to identify trending topics, yet if you don't like the topic, you'll prevent it from trending, yet you maintain that you are exempt from copyright liability because you don't exercise editorial discretion and control because you are a neutral public platform. Are you out of your expletive mind?
Right. They're not. Yeah, they have ceased to be a neutral public platform. They've also just, in my opinion, Mark, really hurt themselves. I can remember really being excited about Twitter and really thinking, boy, this is really the pulse. Twitter is the pulse of what Americans are thinking about, caring about, and talking about right now. Okay? And I really thought, wow, this can be utilized powerfully, and they've hurt themselves in that regard.
Well, both it can be used powerfully both as a consumer. You can find out what's interesting. Right? Mm-hmm. What are people talking about right now? And as a voice.
Right.
I mean, what could be better?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah, to go out there and talk and get into the conversation. So yeah, that part's really frustrating. Now, I was interested in some of their rules about sensitive media. Okay. And from what I understood, there's certain images or videos that they may consider to be sensitive media, again, at their discretion. And if I mark it as sensitive media so that somebody has to click, oh, this is sensitive media and I'm seeing sensitive media now, I'm much less likely to get suspended than if I didn't mark it as sensitive media.
Correct.
Although I could still, if they decided it was hateful enough, if they decided that it was a hate image, even if I marked it as sensitive media, they could go in there and do it. And
Well,
then
let's just
in
talk
their
about nudity, for example. I mean, the funny thing is, a lot of people will say that things are or are not against the Twitter rules when they're actually ignorant. People will report
right.
nudity, pictures of genitalia on Twitter, and
Mark,
they'll
you know what
report
most people think that is against the Twitter rules? Whatever they think should be against the Twitter rules. Most people don't look into
that is my
whatever they
point.
personally find offensive.
Right, exactly, and that is my point, because you can have an account on Twitter, and provided that you go into your account settings and say that you might be producing content that is sensitive in nature, and once you have set that checkbox to true, okay, you've checked it, you can post pictures of nudity, genitalia, and outright pornography. You have not broken any Twitter rule. So when people see objectionable material, okay, they just assume it's against the Twitter rules, when if you read the Twitter rules, no, it's not.
Right, right. Yet, while they'll allow a lot of pornography to go, there are certain political symbols that they're not going to allow to go. When you read their stuff on gore and on surgical procedures, it's very clear that they don't want you posting pictures of aborted babies.
Well, no, it's not very clear. I think that it's worded in such a way that they can't be tagged with saying you can't do that.
You're right. It's not very clear. It was clear to me as somebody who's been
right when I read that. Okay, when I read the section on gore to include pictures of surgical procedures, I just stopped right there and said that's code for an aborted fetus. That's what they're really trying to prevent.
Right.
I did not know, didn't think of at the time, but very recent, or within the past few weeks, a Christian posted a picture of, not a picture, but a meme, okay, of Jesus being crucified, and of course the crown of thorns and the blood, and of course a nail being driven in his hand. Twitter actually disciplined her for publishing gore. Well, I was talking to somebody about that last night, and they said that's not gore. I said, actually it is. Christ's crucifixion was gory.
It's gory.
Okay,
it was a violent murder.
Exactly, and so we as Christians embrace that gore as the high price that was paid for our salvation. That's how important it is. But even if you go back to the Old Testament, would you had been at one of the sacrificial altars? Let me say this. I have seen people criticizing Muslims for the way that they engage in animal sacrifice, and it's heart-wrenching, of course. But that's pretty much the same style that the Old Testament used. You murdered,
exactly.
you slit their throat.
And Jews are also extremely similar in the way they slaughter animals that they're going to eat. Yes, you let them bleed out, and people will come in. What we're really getting at is that different people are going to find different reasons to be offended by different things. The good thing is when initially it seemed like Twitter was going to be this open platform, okay, where you could turn it off if you wanted to turn it off. You didn't have to follow who you didn't want to follow. You could block who you wanted to block, but there was actually going to be freedom of speech, free exchange of ideas. There wasn't going to be the kind of censorship that's existing now, because particularly when you start getting into really hard things to define, like hate speech, Mark. Okay.
Or hate symbols.
Some people now say that I'm guilty of hate speech or hate symbols the instant that I stand up for traditional marriage, or say that marriage is between a man and a woman. Or if I was to post a picture of an ancient statue of Buddha with the swastika before Hitler perverted it, which was just an ancient symbol of perfection. That's what it meant. It meant perfection. And then Hitler, he twisted it around a little bit, right?
He literally rotated it 90 degrees. He hijacked the swastika from the southern Asian regions, the Buddhists, the Indians, the Pakistanis. That swastika, yeah. I did a lot of work. I long before Twitter was around, I worked with a lot of Asian Indians in the hospitality industry, and they would use a swastika. Now, the swastika is rotated 45 degrees. The vertical axis and the horizontal axis are 90 degrees and 180 degrees, okay, directly north, south, east, and west, so to speak. Because I got a wedding invitation, and it was on there to an Indian wedding, Indian meaning Asian Indian. So Hitler kind of hijacked it, but what got me about the Twitter rules is they prohibit the publishing of hate symbols. They do not give any example of what a hate symbol is. They do not give any definition of what a hate symbol is. So that kind of tells me it is whatever Twitter wants it to be in the context. And I begin to think...
I once had a person tell me that my logo that I used for the American refugee on Twitter was a hate symbol. Now, they weren't calling the American flag a hate symbol, which some people do, but they felt that the shadow of the cross over the American flag,
the mast casting a shadow in the form of a cross. Yeah. And I thought it was a very clever profile picture.
Right. And so yeah, people will it's very, very difficult to know, okay, what is Twitter going to think about this? Are they going to say it? In fact, in an example of true ludicrousy, Mark, and this is going to be slow because brands are important, and brands are important to movements. And I think the LGBTQ brand has become an important brand to that movement. At first it was just LBGT, and then they added the Q. And now there's even some that have added an LMNOPT, whatever to it, other things. But LGBTQ has become the most common. But there are now even some in that movement that are upset about the B. You know why?
Now, LGBT, just for clarity. Lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgendered. And then with the Q, some people say it means queer, some people say it means questioning. Okay. But some people are upset with the B because they're upset with the term bisexual because it admits the gender binary. And they reject the entire idea. It admits that there are two genders. That gender is binary.
So now they're getting some division from within their own community. Okay.
Well, I think you probably have, and I can tell by some of the things you're saying. I have studied Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he goes into this identity politics, and he uses this as an example, saying, well, wait a minute, and then, of course, there's intersectionality within those. He says the problem is it goes from LGBT to LGBTQ to LGBTQI to LBG, and he says, and after a while you begin expanding it and expanding it and expanding it to the point you get down to the ultimate group identity is the self. Because each of us are unique. Now, he's a clinical psychologist. When he talks like that, I think it's worth paying attention. And he says that this identity politics is only going to foster tribalism, which is a rather failed social model.
You know what's amazing about the Jordan Peterson phenomenon? The vast majority of his fans are fairly conservative men. Okay? It's the vast majority of people who are identifying with him and talking to him. Not all. That's the vast majority of people that are identifying with him and talking about him. He himself is a moderate. He is a biological evolutionist. I'm not sure if he's Christian. He certainly has tremendous respect for Scripture and tremendous respect for the religious traditions of the West. But he's so intelligent and he's so logical, it kind of disproves the way the left tries to stereotype us, of saying we don't want anybody who disagrees with us.
But the left has come up with a clever stereotype for Jordan Peterson. He's a dumb guy's smart guy.
And it's funny. He and if you go back, I'll tell you who has a lot in common with him. Actually, now he did a poor job, I think, in his presidential campaign. But if you go back and you look at when Dr. Oh man, I can't believe I'm having a brain freeze right now. Ben Carson.
Yeah, Ben.
If you go back and you look at the initial video that actually made Ben Carson from somewhat well known to super famous, and that got people talking about him, it was something he did at the National Prayer Breakfast, where the essential theme of his speech was being against political correctness and against restrictions on free speech and against people being afraid to talk and have a free exchange of ideas. That was the main theme of his talk. That's a lot of what Jordan Peterson talks about. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to be able to do on Twitter, but it's become more and more difficult to do on Twitter.
Yeah. And it seems now, don't know where you were going next, but I want to point out that Sunbelt Girl, I think, sent me a link to a Wall Street Journal article. I read it with a great deal of interest, and I wanted to share it with somebody, but then I realized when I tried to go there again, since I'm not a subscriber, I can't look at it. I can only look at it once.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting article because recently Facebook brought together, and again, I am going to do my best to paraphrase and summarize from memory of reading this article one time. And if I am inaccurate in my summary or paraphrase, I simply apologize. I'm not trying to mislead anybody. But they basically brought in two of the figures that were brought in were Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, and one of the others was the Southern Poverty Law Center. So, and there were numerous others. Okay, I at risk of being wrong, I'm not going to try to enumerate them, but you get the idea. We're going to have a roundtable here, and we're going to bring in the stakeholders on the left and the stakeholders on the right. And we're going to get together and we're going to work this out. Well, first of all, I challenge that intent if that is the stated motive, okay? Because I think the real intent was to put on a show that they were doing that so that they could tell a United States senator they were doing it. Please don't take away our neutral public forum status. We're trying to work this out among the very stakeholders. Okay, that's criticism number one. I don't buy the smoke screen that this is seeming to portray. Okay. Number two, do you really think you're going to get those people in a room and get consensus on anything? Really?
No.
Come on. Okay.
No.
Number three, as much as I agree with Tony Perkins and the Family Research Council, they do not represent me.
No.
Okay. Why wasn't PJNET invited, for goodness sakes? Why wasn't Roger? How about Sunbelt Girl? How about Jay Steins 3? How about Chuck Nellis?
Well, PJNET is much more effective on Twitter than Family Research Council ever was.
Okay, you've buried your microphone somewhere. Okay, there we go.
Family Research Council was never successful on Twitter. Family Research Channel is a large organization.
This was a Facebook meeting, by the way.
Loud voice.
Yeah, this was Facebook. But anyway,
I don't think they ever necessarily did Facebook that well. I don't think they ever necessarily did social media that well. They did the old traditional media well, and then they were already big when social media got big, and so they kind of had a name. But they weren't one of the pioneers of figuring out how to really use social media, which PJNet was.
But they were a stakeholder, and this, by the way, and
certainly,
and I know we're kind of diverting from some of the focal points, but it's interesting conversation. I really enjoy. Roger, have I ever mentioned how much I enjoy working with you?
You have, and I enjoy working with you as well.
Okay,
and I always have. We've been able to talk about things that we agree on and things that we disagree on.
I went up to somebody at work the other day who I knew. I'd never said that. And I said, "Hey, have I ever told you that I really enjoy working with you?" And they said, "Well, no, you haven't." I said, "Well, there might be a reason for that."
Very good.
And but anyway, the the presumption that these stakeholders are representative of the users of their platform, I think, is a leap of faith, a convenient construct. One of the things that put me on note, Roger, as I began working with some of the, I won't say the representatives, I worked directly with very, very few elected officials, but I worked with all of their communications directors and sometimes their chief of staff. Right. I became immediately put on notice, that they didn't know Twitter any more than they knew, their sister's bra strap. I mean, they just didn't know. Right. That's not what they do. They are not at all expert on Twitter. So I take your point and I concur. If and I know we're talking about Twitter when the meeting was Facebook, but it's the same principle. If you think that, I'll give you another example, by the way. When I would talk to the social media director for some of these large names that you would recognize, they have Twitter accounts with under 1,000 followers. Now, I thought to myself, how did they get that job? Because if I were hiring a social media director and I saw a resume who had 1,000 Twitter followers, I would summarily dismiss that resume, period.
Right.
You can't possibly be an expert on Twitter if you have only 1,000 followers. I'm sorry. Okay. That's self-evident. That would be like applying for a job where a PhD is required and you have a GED.
Right.
It's that. I could give you other examples. In conversations with these people, they just were utterly clueless. And yet they are in decision-making positions, and they're actually, there were just several times when it was holding PJNET. Here's how utterly insane this is. There was a time, this is now against the Twitter rules, and we don't do it anymore. But at the time, I don't think it was, because we notified people when they signed up for PJNET and gave access to their Twitter account. One of the first pieces of automation we set up was if you're a Republican member of the House or Senate and you use the PJNET hashtag, every PJNET member, the automation would cause every PJNET member to retweet that tweet. And a couple of congressmen caught on to this real quick, and they got catapulted. I mean, most congressmen only get a few retweets. They're really not that popular.
Right.
Well, every January, every new, when at the House, okay, the Republican caucus has what they call the digital challenge, and they literally set up a scoring system where views on YouTube, retweets on Twitter, and they have an accounting firm keep score. And what they're trying to do, of course, is to encourage members of Congress to become more influential on Twitter. Well, so it's a contest with a score. Well, I actually had Congressman Bridenstine call me and say, "I want to win this thing." What do you want? I did speak directly with him. I, to this day, have his cell phone number.
He was a freshman back then.
He was a freshman. He had just gotten there.
Yeah.
And so he almost...
Good guy. Very conservative.
Very good guy. Good as they get. He and I have prayed together on the phone. And just a great guy. What's his name? Darrell Issa was the leader of the oversight committee. And anyway, Bridenstine almost won. Well, the next year, without any contact with me, they changed the rules that you couldn't use PJNet in your tweets. Or if you did, the score, that tweet wouldn't count. So it was that powerful. Of course, they didn't ask me. And of course, why would they do that? Every Republican could do the same thing. So it's fair.
Right.
But the fact is, they didn't even consult me. Okay, that's how out in the dark they are. But anyway, let me let you talk a minute. I'm sorry.
Whereas you would think they would say we should be consulting this guy that was able to almost get this freshman congressman to win. was almost able to help this freshman congressman win. This is the kind of guy we should consult. You know what I was also thinking about, Mark? Let me tell you one of the reasons why you know that the group meeting is kind of disingenuous. You don't need one. All you need, and we had a conversation about this the other day. All you need to do is say, we are a free speech platform, and anything is allowed unless we deem it to be against the law. And if we deem something to be against the law, what we're going to do is this. We're going to take it down, and we're going to report it to the appropriate law enforcement authorities. Mm-hmm. And then if those law enforcement authorities come back and say there's nothing illegal about that, we'll put it back. Mm-hmm. Okay? You've just taken care of your child pornography. You've taken care of your terrorist threats. You've taken care of any type of legitimate personal harassment. Okay? But you're allowing free speech. They're afraid to actually allow free speech.
Well, as I was actually literally taking a shower tonight, contemplating some of the topics, I'm envisioning somebody like Ted Cruz grilling Twitter. And of course, mm-hmm. all of these measures that they're taking are not taken in the name of bias against conservatives. It's in the name of safety. Safety. Mm-hmm. And in that Wall Street Journal or Washington, whatever it was, it showed the number of disciplinary actions taken last year. The vast majority of them had to do with abuse, and I forget. I wish I could remember, but for example, threats, or threats on life, that was such a minority. But I can imagine someone like Ted Cruz saying, of the 400 and something thousand incidences you took disciplinary action, how many police reports did you file? And then I got thinking, what if Del Harvey, who's the person at Twitter in charge of, quote, safety, okay, mm-hmm. what would happen if she didn't come to work one day or for an entire week or an entire month, and there was nobody in charge of, quote, safety? What would happen? Okay, well, based on the statistics, a very, very small minority of the actions taken by Twitter, and I'm saying small minority in the 1 or 2% range, it's sort of like a 1 or 2% of the guns sold kill people in murders. Mm-hmm. So you blame, 1 or 2% of the forks manufactured are used by fat people. It's this. What would happen? I can't imagine. I mean, if there were no rules and it truly were an open platform, of course I would be exposed to some objectionable material. What would I then do? There's no Twitter safety to complain to. What would you do?
I can block
them.
Yeah.
Learn to stay on hashtags that are likely to have content that you want to digest. If you don't want to digest content, there are certain hashtags associated with that content. Well, don't search them. Okay?
For example, Mark, I don't want to see pornography. Okay? Doesn't have a good effect on me spiritually. Doesn't take me to a good place. Well, Twitter's full of pornography.
Sure.
I don't see it.
If you know the hashtags, it's easy to find.
It's easy to find. Okay, yeah. I avoid the hashtags. I block accounts.
Yeah.
I do what I can to avoid something, and I have to block it because I'm not even going to sit here and lie and say that some of it doesn't appeal to me. No, it appeals to what's most base in it. Mm-hmm. Some of it will appeal to my most base nature. Okay, yeah. And but it's not a problem for me to avoid it. Now,
well, let's talk about another narrative out there, okay, on that same line of reasoning, okay? You have ways to avoid it, okay? You just mentioned things you can do to avoid it, but think about the narrative that a group of 11 Russians manipulated the outcome of a national election when PJNET was a much bigger group than that, and we had trillions of tweets operating in the open. Yet our candidates lost.
Right.
I mean,
Almost all of our candidates
without all of this safety apparatus out there, I might be. You mean to tell me that I might? Oh my God! See a tweet supporting Hillary. Oh, oh! You know, I mean, come on, folks! It's a tweet, really. Is the American electorate that stupid in their mind that if they see a pro-Trump or what's that girl's name? Ortega, you know who I'm talking about.
Cortez, the one who's crossed between a beautiful woman.
Oh my God! I saw one of her tweets. Come on, folks, grow up.
Right.
Grow up. Oh my God, Roger, I can't continue. I read a Chuck Schumer tweet.
It's not a safe place.
It's not a safe
Mark,
place.
As ridiculous as you're making it, this is where college campuses are going. They're even starting to have comfort animals and ice cream and Jello. And I'm not kidding. Okay?
Grow up.
Trigger warnings on courses. Okay. and things like that.
I'm laughing. It's so outside of reality. You know, now you could get closer and say, well, there's bullying going on. Well, bullying's always gone on. Technology has increased the scope and scale of it, but the fact is,
the number one type of bullying that's going on is by people who believe in political correctness that want to shut down free speech. You know, I hate to defend Twitter, okay, but let me say something. Look at what's going on with Gab right now. Gab essentially tried to do exactly what we're talking about. And even though they were started mainly because they felt conservatives were being discriminated against, they were willing to let liberals on Gab, and anybody could go on Gab. And Gab started a new social media platform, and they were going to do their best to not censor. Okay? Well, what happens is that the bullies start going after them on the Apple Store and on the Google Store and making all kinds of threats. And before you know it, Google has kicked the app out of their store, and Apple has kicked their app out of the store. Mark, if you're not in the Google and the Apple or the Apple Store, not very many people are going to get your app. That's where most people get 99% of their apps.
Yeah, and this is where the argument, and see, I have defended Twitter and Facebook. They are not monopolies by my definition.
Right.
Okay? But yet, and you know what? Apple and Google aren't monopolies on apps, but yet the point you're making leads you to the conclusion that they are, there is a de facto and de jure legal standard. De jure means it is statutorily defined as, okay? De facto means, well, it's just a fact. There's no statute about it, but there's no statute that says gravity pulls you toward the earth. So you can legally argue that point all the way down from the 14th floor. You will still splat when you hit the sidewalk. So these.
In fact, there's some flat earthers on Twitter that do argue that point.
Right. So there are, they are a Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and as you said, the Apple Store and play.google.com. Those are de facto monopolies, and when they exercise control that I would normally say, or if they're a private company, they can do business with whoever they want to. Well, here's the thing. That's not true, and that's been legally opposed in the civil rights movement, saying just because you're a business doesn't mean you can do business with who you want to. So whether you like that rule or not.
Yeah, but what they did was, I don't want to get into the weeds, but what they did do in the civil rights movement is they started creating special protected classes. And you could still refuse business for whatever reason, so long as somebody wasn't in a special protected class.
Or the reason didn't engage that. But the point being is, whether you like the rule or not, okay, the rule, put it this way, I would say Twitter can make whatever rules they want to. Okay, and we're playing on their playground as a guest, but I think regardless of who you are or what political point of view you have, if you want to have some rules, I think you should apply them fairly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Absolutely.
what you're hinting at or saying outright, is that Gab has no chance by the Apple Store and Google Play. The Google app place, play.google.com. By them excluding Gab from their app stores, they have effectively squashed it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an act of aggression, I
Right.
guess. Is that
Right.
your point?
Right.
Of
That's
political activism, or you might say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the
Yeah.
chat,
Yeah.
a very cogent comment from Sunbelt Girl, unless you're a cake baker not wanting to service the gay community.
Exactly. But you see that's where they went to, is they went to that cake bakers aren't a protected class, and that gay people were. That's the insane reasoning behind all of these things.
Well, the
And,
Twitter rules,
so,
let me try to reel it back into where we started. We went over hashtag trending and hashtags. We went over gore. Was there anything, or we can, of course, save it for a future show. Was there anything else that
quickly,
jumped
Mark,
off the
what is
page?
because I'm hearing some confusion on the part of some people that think there's some people out there that think that any automation at all is against the rules, and that is clearly not true. And I've used programs like Hootsuite is what I used in the past, and I know a lot of people use TweetDeck, and people used PJNET to schedule certain tweets recurring at certain times. That is not against the Twitter rules. Am I correct?
Well, leave out the word recurring. Okay, let's simplify it.
Okay.
Scheduling tweets, I have not read anything in the Twitter rules that prohibit scheduling tweets. In fact, I can tell you without a doubt, when you mentioned TweetDeck, TweetDeck was a Twitter app. Okay? Twitter actually bought that app, and now it's tweetdeck.twitter.com.
Okay.
So, if scheduling tweets is against the rules, TweetDeck has a tweet scheduling facility. Twitter themselves, the product that they own, can be used to break the Twitter rules. Okay, I mean that. So I think we can summarily dismiss the notion that scheduling tweets to be sent while you're sleeping and logged out of Twitter, to be sent out robotically, quote, okay, is not against the rules. I've read it.
Engage an audience that uses Twitter at different times of day than you do.
Sure, or it's a matter of convenience.
Yeah.
I've only got 5 minutes while I'm drinking my coffee to set up my tweets for the day, and I want to tweet today while I'm at work. Okay, that's fine. So that's not against the rules. But you said recurring. Now, once you say recurring, now I can tell you without a doubt that one of the anomalies, one of the crazy things about recurring tweets is that would fall, and let me be very specific here because I've read this fervently. Okay. Under the heading of spam, Twitter refers to duplicative. Now, let's start there. In the actual, first of all, they've got lawyers. These words are chosen very carefully. They didn't say duplicate. They said duplicative. Duplicative. There's a difference. Okay, and I won't go into the nuances of the difference right now. But believe me, they could have said duplicate, and we all would have known what that means. But no, they said duplicative.
They're apparently trying to get you to just change one word.
Okay, now, or substantially similar. Now, substantially similar, first of all, duplicate is easily defined. That's very easy to define. Duplicative is more difficult to define. But when you say substantially similar, Roger, that could be just about any two tweets on the same topic, if that's how Twitter wants to interpret it. Our hashtag events.
If you are a pro-life person and you frequently offer that, argue that position on Twitter, all of those tweets could be said to be substantially
similar. When you look at the
Yes.
featured tweets that PJNet has, all 50 of them could
Are
be,
substantially similar.
well, could be
Could be, yeah.
interpreted as substantially similar because they're on the same topic. I think the intent there was to avoid just adding a random number at the end of it or reversing the order of that. I mean, but again, they leave it really wide open to their interpretation, substantially similar, dispatched by your own or multiple accounts under your control. So in other words, let me get this right, Twitter, by the book. If I wake up this morning and post on Twitter, good morning, okay, no problem. If I wake up tomorrow morning and post good morning, that is a direct violation of the Twitter rules. No doubt about it.
Yet they allow you to do it.
Well, it's
They won't allow you
absurd.
to do it
Okay,
5
I mean,
minutes
I'm just
apart,
pointing out first the absurdity of the rule.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Right.
if I try
Right.
to say good morning now, and 1 minute later try to say it again, Twitter will intercept the second one and say, oops, you've already said that. So in other words,
Okay.
Twitter doesn't want duplicate content, right? I mean, you would think that's what their rule says.
At least not a minute apart, they don't.
Right. But yet, in other words, they know that it's duplicate. They intercept it and they stop it and say, oops, you've already said that. However, tomorrow, if I dispatch it, they don't intercept it. They allow it, and it's subject to discipline. Now, I think I'm a coach and I'm a parent. But you don't have to be a parent or a coach to understand. All you have to be is an adult to understand the purpose of discipline is to correct the behavior. What other conclusion can I come to, Roger? That is not the case on Twitter. They are allowing you to do it so that they can punish you for doing it. What other conclusion can you
If
come
they
to?
choose to.
If they choose to.
If they choose
They
to.
can
at their
use it. They
discretion
can
whenever
use
they
this
want to.
rule as a tool to make you
Right.
guilty of something.
Yes.
So, all right, so what PJNet does, if you use our tweet scheduler, okay, and now you have to actually tell Twitter what your app is going to do. You have to apply for an application on Twitter. You have to use 300 words or more. But while we're having fun here, I will read you. I applied for a Twitter app and got it. Okay. And I had to describe in 300 words or more what my application
Okay, so
was.
presumably you applied for the app, you got it, you had to describe what it was. So whatever you're about to describe is presumably legal on Twitter.
That's the reasoning. I will read it verbatim.
Okay.
My app will be used as a personal tweet scheduler for my own exclusive use. No other Twitter user or account will be able to use my app. My app will curate content and dispatch it on my behalf at scheduled intervals, even if I'm not logged in on Twitter. In some cases, it is possible that I may repeat previously dispatched content to contemporaneously refresh the tweet and make it visible to users who may not have been online to see and interact with the previously dispatched tweet. In those cases, the app will delete the previously dispatched tweet prior to dispatching the replacement tweet.
No, you got smart there.
In order to be in compliance with the quote duplicate content end of quote clause of the Twitter rules. They approved that. I put it on my clipboard and saved it so that other people who apply for apps that want to use our platform, if you'll use those words, they pretty much have to approve it. They can't approve me using it, but not you, can they? I mean, that would look pretty horrible. Ted Cruz could have fun with that on the Senate floor.
Right. No, you designed it intelligently, because had they not approved it, you could make an argument that your logic didn't work. That, oh no, just because you've deleted the previous tweet, it's still duplicate. It's still duplicate. Okay? You could make that argument, except you said this fixes the problem, and they agreed in approving your app.
By approving my app, they agree with my logic. Okay,
Right.
it's inescapable,
Right.
and they're conceding, or not conceding. They're just, I mean, I chose these words, as you can tell, rather carefully, and so to argue that scheduling tweets in and by itself is against the Twitter rules is crazy. I mean,
Yeah, let me ask you another question, Mark, because this is getting interesting here. Now, are you currently allowing, because you said this would be for your own personal use, are you currently allowing other people who use PJNET to basically use that app to do the same thing?
No. The app starts out and says, my app will be for my personal use and no other Twitter user or account. And this addresses that question, but it also addresses the other question of other accounts under your control.
Okay.
Okay? The app is literally personal. It's a one-to-one relationship between that Twitter account and that app. Mm-hmm. Each account has its own app. Now, if I have multiple Twitter accounts and I get multiple apps and use them all the same way, now hold on there. Now you're into the second clause of the Twitter rules. It says use multiple accounts under your control to dispatch the same content. You may have crossed the line there, so I don't do that. And by the way, this is, I am making, well, I won't go there, but so forget the notion that scheduling tweets is against the rules. It certainly it can't be. It's not in the rules. I've read them. If it is, please point it out.
Right.
Because if it is, then I'm going to question, why does Twitter do it with TweetDeck when they own TweetDeck, and why did they approve my app and others who I cut and paste this and sent it to them saying, here's what you put in here.
Mark, one other thing I want to bring up that's positively allowed. It can be abused and not, and you can abuse it and then be breaking the rules. But it's allowed, and some people are under the impression that it's not. And it's important because there's useful reasons to do this. And that is having multiple accounts is clearly allowed. I've looked at the rules.
Oh,
you
yes.
can have a parody account. You can't try to make a parody account come off as though it's actually that person. You can't be committing slander and so on. But you can have a parody account. One of the reasons that I had, well, first of all, let's be honest. We were all trying to figure out how to not get suspended by Twitter while using Twitter to the maximum possible benefit, which is ridiculous because they won't communicate with you. And so you're literally trying to not get suspended or not get put in Twitter jail.
Well, it's the equivalent of trying to figure out what is critical mass by just keep adding a little more to it until it goes bang.
Until it goes back. So you would have multiple accounts, honestly, for that reason, which they would probably frown upon.
Sometimes referred to as backup accounts.
As backup accounts. But I also, I have one account where I do nothing except discuss my Catholic faith and Catholic issues.
I know.
And that account's at Roger is Catholic. It's not one where I debate either. It's where I talk to other Catholics. I do debate other Catholics in a Catholic on Catholic debate. But it's, I use it and it's extremely useful to me for that, because if I want to debate what I don't like about the current Pope with another Catholic, the last thing I want to be distracted by is people of other faiths who are upset by the whole notion of a Pope to begin with.
Right.
And are going to be taking me off in some other direction.
Well, and they don't want to hear it. I mean, it's not only that. Not only do you want the opposite. Roger, we're of different faiths. I don't follow that account. I've told you that.
Right.
And that's not to say that you're wrong or I'm right. It's just that's what you do. The fact is, all of us, our personalities are not just monolithic. We're not just a Christian. We're not just a conservative. We're not just a man or a woman. Okay? We all have various interests. So it is very possible and desirable for many to say, well, when I want to talk about, well, you're an animal lover. I don't care about your animal lover tweets. Why don't you have an account for that?
You're right.
Okay? I'm not interested in animals. It's not that I hate animals or would wish them any harm, but I'm not an animal lover.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Except
I
for your own dog.
but to your point, well, of course I love my own dog, and you know what? My dog loves me. But to your point, it's impossible to logically maintain the notion that, oh, they've set up all these multiple accounts and that's against the rules. Twitter tells you it's in the rules if you have more than one account. Well, if it's against the rules, they wouldn't say that. Okay? It's that simple.
Yeah. On the phone app, on their phone app, it's very easy for me to switch back and forth between different accounts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. On the same app. And so yes, there are very legitimate reasons for doing that with Twitter. And that always gets to me though. I've had people, oh my God, you're breaking the Twitter rules of service. You know, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing the other.
Well, Twitter in a rare case of clarity actually talks about duplicate content, and they actually say that if you've got an account based in one time zone and then in another time zone, it is permissible under those circumstances to say the eclipse is happening right now, provided that they're talking about with respect to, you know what I'm saying? So they, in a rare case of giving an example, they point out a couple of things. One, duplicate content from different accounts is in the context of, well, it could be contextually permitted based on time zone only. But the fact that they give that example is a nod of the head saying it's okay. So the notion that, you know, these people have set up all these multiple accounts. Well, now, but you said in some cases, if, you know, well, put it this way, the ones that get noticed are abusing those multiple accounts. And I think that's where we're going next.
Yeah. You can abuse multiple accounts simply trying to pretend like you have more followers than you do. Trying
get
to
retweeting yourself, you know, with your other accounts.
Yes. Which we've all done at least once.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with myself. Why shouldn't I?
And sometimes on my political account, I've posted something that I really want to share with my Catholic followers, or something like that. I wanted to ask you one question before we end this, Mark, because it's something I don't have a full understanding of, and I don't know if it's because of violating Twitter rules that this has happened to me. I don't know if it's Twitter even admits that it's happening, but it's the concept of shadow banning. And I can tell you this, that Roger is Catholic account follows and is followed by over 3,000 Catholics. And at one time was a pretty robust account. Well, I took some time off of Twitter, but before I did, I got active with PJNET and some of the pro-life causes on that account. And I have a lot of evidence to suggest there's some shadow banning going on that account, and that my tweets are not seen. One of the things that I've noticed is I can put out a Catholic tweet on that, and it'll get no retweets until somebody retweets it that has maybe a quarter of the followers that I have, and then suddenly people that have seen it through them start retweeting it, and those same people are still following me. What's going on with that? Do you know what causes shadow banning? Is
no,
real
no
thing?
one. Anyone that says they know is speaking without authority. Twitter does not document what triggers a shadow ban, and what's particularly egregious about shadow banning is one, the very theory of it. If you're breaking the rules, why would you limit the account by shadow banning it? Why wouldn't you just suspend it? Okay? They've broken the rules. So I don't understand this as a form of discipline. The other odd observation that I made is they were asked in a Senate hearing point blank, do they engage in shadow banning? And they point blank said no. However, we will from time to time reduce the visibility of certain users' tweets under certain circumstances. Well, that's shadow banning.
Okay, well, that's shadow banning.
I mean, yeah. They deny it and then they affirm it in the same response, and it's like let's get off on a semantic, wild goose chase. I don't understand it. What's really bad about shadow banning is that tells me that there's foul play on Twitter's part. Is one of the ways that I would have people ask me, am I shadow banned? Okay. And the reason they would ask me is they don't see their own hashtags on, well, when Twitter first introduced shadow banning, you could see your own tweets, but nobody else could, on a hashtag search. And I found that odd that they purpose. I mean, that was pretty darn sneaky. Okay. Nobody can see you in a hashtag search, but if you're logged in and search on the hashtag, your tweets appear in the hashtag search. Oh, that's really sneaky. So you're not on notice that you've been shadow banned, and there is no forum for appeal. You do not know why you've been shadow. This whole thing stinks, basically. Yeah. What is the purpose of this? Well, if you act that way, don't be surprised when people on the right say you have a bias against conservatives. Don't be surprised when Christians say you have a bias against Christians. Don't be surprised when the Southern Poverty Law Center says you have a bias against liberals. Now, we all believe that it is only the conservatives that are catching heat from Twitter, but if you actually go delve into liberal hashtags or progressive hashtags, they have their extremists who are complaining about Twitter as well. Okay. Now, I think overall the scales are heavily tilted, biased against anything on the right. So that would include conservatives and Christians. But I don't understand why they have shadow banning other than to implement policy bias. Put it this way: what other justification could there be for shadow banning?
Probably one of the most effective ways of shutting somebody down, because the person doesn't know they're shut down, and the person continues to tweet into thin air instead of the person creating a new account, moving on to another platform, doing something else, to get their message out.
Right.
And
but what possible good?
I used to get all these retweets and likes.
What's the end game? I mean, what is, and given the fact that they don't notify you, they don't tell you why, you don't know when you're going to be unshadow banned, and there's no appeal mechanism. You don't know. I mean, that is leaving the door open to being accused of bias. I wouldn't do it.
Right.
One of the first things you learn in any leadership training is give clear orders. I got an order the other day to don't split his route. Well, I didn't split his route. Okay. Then when I came back, said, "Why'd you split his route?" I said, "I didn't." What she said, "No, I wanted him to run that. I wanted you to stay here and help me answer the phone." And I thought to myself, then why didn't you say, "Stay here and answer the phone"? It is not my if the Sun Tzu, read Sun Tzu. If the order is not clear, whose fault is it? It's the guy that gave the order's fault. Don't blame the outcome. Don't assign the fault to the guy who carried out the unclear order when it turned out bad. Gettysburg, in large part, well, first of all, Robert E. Lee in that particular battle forgot everything he knew, or ignored everything he knew. But a critical point in the battle was he told one of his captains to take objective A and objective B if possible. If possible. Well, guess what? They took objective A. They did not even attempt objective B. And objective B was a pivotal point in the battle that caused Lee to lose. He forgot what Sun Tzu said. Orders have to be clear. Rules have to be clear. We have to communicate with clarity. And if you don't communicate with clarity, chaos is the result.
Well, I hope that as unclear as a lot of the Twitter rules are, that by reading them and discussing them and talking about our experiences with them, we've at least somewhat cleared it up for people. And yep, there are certain things you can do and certain things you can't do, and because it's frustrating not knowing what the rules are.
Well, I think the end game here was not to help people understand the rules. What my end game in having this discussion is, don't just ascribe your feelings about what is right or wrong to the Twitter rules. Go to twitter.com/rules and actually read them. Now, when you read them, you won't be much better off because the rules are very, very vague. But let's get let's use some fact-based argumentation, and let's not say just because we don't like something that it's against the rules. I spoke earlier, people will report apparent pornography to Twitter. Well, pornography is not against the rules on Twitter. What is pornography? Put it this way. A picture of genitalia is not necessarily against the Twitter rules, and I'm being very nice the way I'm saying that.
And look, pornography is hard to define because you have such a thing as nude art,
right?
And you have pornography, and if you read,
and you have such a thing as the Second Amendment or the First Amendment.
Yeah,
you know,
if you read court rulings on it, it will say such things like pornography is something where display of the genitalia is lascivious and obscene.
Okay, well, what is lascivious?
Okay, well, what's lascivious?
Oh, no.
Here,
let's say it this way. Lascivious and obscene to a casual observer, a reasonable observer. Right. Well, what is a reasonable observer?
That's going to change depending on a community. That's going to change depending on...
Well, by the way, I actually worked on anti-porn projects with a friend of mine who is a Mormon. And he's taking this very seriously, and he found the legal loophole that they get around, okay? In the legal doctrine that you see out there, it'll say is against community standards. Well, go find me a copy of community standards. Well, he actually drafted some community standards, and he goes city by city, and he's working in the state of Utah, and goes to the city council and has drafted community standards. Of course, they're subject to some of the vagueness that goes along with this. But the fact is that when you read the law, and this is what you get into in the Twitter rules, please read the rules. Don't just assume the Twitter rules say a certain thing. But having read them, you may not be much better off, but at least familiarize yourself with the game you're in. Sun Tzu says, know your enemy. That was written 500 years before Christ. I don't know if you've read Sun Tzu. It is still, to this day, required. There's an entire class at West Point on Sun Tzu.
Right.
It's an amazing book, and he just wrote down some things. By the way, Sun Tzu took an army in the Chu dynasty.
Is it The Art of Warfare, or is it...
Right, The Art of War, Sun Tzu.
Yeah.
There's some argument as to if that was ever actually a book. But nonetheless, his principles that he enumerated in bamboo strips anyway. But he took an army of about 30,000 in the Chu dynasty up against an army of about 240,000 in the Qin dynasty. We now know the Qin dynasty as China. Okay. He was a very interesting person. When the Chu dynasty was looking for a leader to take them into this war that was so lopsided numerically, he brought Sun Tzu in, and Sun Tzu said, I can turn, now this was 500 years before Christ, I can turn women into a fierce fighting force. and the emperor laughed and said, prove it. So he gathered up a few women. He appointed a couple of them captain, and he went through some basic drills, and he brought them into the king's court. This is, by the way, on a documentary on YouTube on the History Channel. Okay, I saw it. It's unbelievable. Okay. And so Sun Tzu ordered the two captains to tell their little battalion to do something, and of course all the women giggled and laughed and didn't do it. Sun Tzu repeated the order, And they again giggled and laughed. Well, the emperor is not too impressed at this point. Sun Tzu then took his sword and cut the heads off of the two captains and appointed two new captains. And you know what? Those women became a fierce fighting force.
There you go.
That actually happened. I'm sorry about the nature. Well, that's the nature of war, folks. But you see, orders have to be clear and orders have to be followed. Otherwise, chaos ensues, and worse. So, Sun Tzu there's about 25 principles that are in his book. I've actually got the book. Someone gave it to me as a Christmas gift from church because I said I wanted it. And it's kind of hard to read, to tell you the truth, because of the interpretation problems. And but orders have to be clear and orders have to be followed. And I think it's a good model if we're going to be on Twitter, Facebook, or just in life in general. There has to be boundaries, and whether you like them or not, Twitter needs to set up some boundaries if they're going to exercise editorial control. But I think they would be best to step back and simply say it's a neutral public forum, and any act they take needs to be accompanied by a police report or reporting the incident to the appropriate jurisdictional authority, and leave themselves out of it, or they are in deep trouble. And you could pretty well throw Facebook and the rest of them in there in the same boat. That's where I'm at. Oh, they do.
Right. Well, alrighty, Mark, I enjoyed it.
I always enjoy speaking with you, Roger, and hopefully next time you charge your equipment, it will actually charge. I didn't know if we were going to pull this off tonight, but fortunately, everything went well. Don't know what we're going to talk about next week, folks, but I assure you that Roger will become expert on it between now and then, and I always look forward. Roger, you're a great friend, and you're one of the most brilliant minds I have ever encountered. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
God bless you, Mark. Keep up the good work.
All right, man. Thank you. I really enjoy talking to that guy. We have had so many conversations like that just go on for hours and hours and hours over the past year or so. Excuse me. So I just wanted to share that with you. I hope you enjoyed it, and he'll be back next week. I don't know if we're going to be able to get Troy Towns in here on Monday or not, but I hope to. And if not, we'll get him the following Monday. We're working on it. Dale Didway will be back on Tuesday. And hey, if we can find some more, we'll get them too. Thanks for joining in tonight.